Oh, my goodness. The last time that I spoke here on Father's Day, the talk was so wonderful that I was invited to come back again 13 years later. Oh, well. A lot has happened in that time. And I recall sharing a lot of ideas with you back in 2012. Man. I can recall telling you that I wasn't so sure about this whole fathers thing. And as I was trying to figure out how to be a father to my two girls and to my granddaughter, a few things have changed since 2012. For example, my oldest, Jasmine, used to call me father, and now I'm dad. My job was that of a hitman for her. My job was to run off the boyfriends who didn't get the message that she wasn't interested in them anymore, and I obliged happily. My roles are different for each child. To my youngest, Jerea, who had to deal with getting stuck in a snowbank, labored to get her driver's license, my job was to make sure that above all else, that the internet, the Wi-Fi, was up and running 24 hours a day, or there would be a problem. Zoe is my granddaughter. When she was 6 years old and a first grader, her mission for me was to make sure that the Saturday oatmeal that I prepared for her tasted like something. In other words, it had to have butter, it had to have cinnamon, and it had to taste good. And she was the judge of that. So to her, I was this old, wrinkly man who wasn't too bright. And she was probably right. And for each of these ladies, being a father involved being in action. How could you idly sit by with these guys? You know, I am a hitman, and I am the chef for Saturday mornings anyway. And I couldn't just let mom or grandma do all the work. And it reminds me of a passage in the Bible where it says, it's the Father's good pleasure to give you the desires of your heart. Now, I'm thinking when that was written that the biblical scholars weren't thinking about 2012 or 2025. It didn't say anything about giving you all the money in your pocket. It didn't say that. But sometimes it seems like that's what we're doing. So I see my job as a father figure is doing my best to what Myrtle Fillmore says, to get at it. Whatever getting at it means, that's my job. And to show up in meaningful ways for my girls. The other day, we were looking at some videos and some old pictures taken over the years, and they brought back memories of the recitals, the class projects, and the many ways that we show up to nurture and to teach and to counsel and to be in the gap for them. And I told Francine, I said, I had no idea that this little child eating cookies and licking the cream and then smearing it all over her face would grow up into a fabulous young lady. And I said that we've been involved in their lives in so many different ways. Gone are the high chairs, the Gerber baby food. I still look at it to see what flavors they offer in the grocery store when we go by. The late night calls of being stuck in a snowdrift. I don't get those anymore. Or playing referee when the friends couldn't see eye to eye. That job has passed by for the most part. In many ways, my role was getting them from one day to the next without dying. And that kind of reminds me of the prayer of Jabez. He says, oh, that thou would bless me indeed, to enlarge my territory. And in so many words, to keep me from harm. And the story ends with the scripture saying that God granted what he asked. Not long ago, I recently read a 10-page paper that my granddaughter Zoe had written. One of the last she penned as a freshman at the University of Wisconsin in River Falls. This is the same little girl who used to sing herself to sleep as she cuddled with her lime green baby hippo, and the same one who played so hard that she'd come back home with her socks and shoeless because she left them in different places all over the neighborhood. It's the same little girl who says, "Grandpa, please read this paper for me." So solving the issue of finding the missing clothes has been replaced by getting my opinion on that final paper that she had written. And now she's preparing for her sophomore year at the University of Wisconsin, River Falls. Today, I'm no longer the IT professional for our house, for my youngest, or pulling her out of those snowbanks. Because today, with a California driver's license in hand, she's deftly navigating the streets of Los Angeles, a place that she calls home, with her dog tur, Kobe. It weighs only 21 pounds. I've also learned not to take credit for her achievements because that 15-year-old now is a 28-year-old talented communicator, and she is a graduate of the University of Kansas, and she's a manager now for something called influencers. I don't know what an influencer is, but she's a manager of that, and I'm grateful for that. And to be honest, I miss the job of being a hitman for my oldest daughter, Jasmine. That's because she fired me. About 5 years ago, the best of one of those boyfriends, as she tried to run off, caused her to change her last name from Evans to Rhodey. So my fighting days are over. My, how things change. So from my oldest, Jasmine, who has gotten lost in Stillwater on a dirt road at midnight while walking, who has also earned a couple of degrees, I've learned patience. And even as the roles are different that I play in the lives of my girls, the lessons that I've learned from them are more priceless than anything that I could have ever shared with them. And Papa, now known as Grandpa, has learned from my 6-year-old Zoe, as I mentioned, who used to leave her socks outside 5 houses apart in the neighborhood, who enjoys sledding in sub-zero weather, who would rather play from sunup to sundown as she drops into her bedtime and just sing herself to sleep. I've learned how not to get in a tizzy over the small things, socks, because in her mind, there is no such thing as anything small. And now as an education major specializing in early childhood development, she works part-time with the small things, the small people, at a daycare facility right next door from her dorm at River Falls. I couldn't be more happy for her. After my 4th birthday, and I'm looking at you and you say, "Man, that must have been a long time ago." After my 4th birthday, my dad wasn't around. I was raised by my mother, my grandfather, my grandmother, my uncle, my cousins, and anybody who was older than me thought that they should be giving me direction. I was raised by all those folks. I had a lot of father figures from whom I could draw. And not until I was preparing for this talk this morning did I understand that the lessons that I learned from them, which include nurturing and spirituality, the last one actually came from my grandmother, because she influenced my grandfather. He would always say, "Just do what your grandmother said." Fine. My grandmother was about this tall, And I think she seemed a little larger than that as I was growing up, because in those days we had the opportunity, and I didn't know it at the time, but we had the opportunity to live with them. That was my first home that I knew anything about. And likewise, Zoe had the opportunity to live with Francine and I in her early years. Now, you'll have to ask her if she thinks it was an opportunity. In my youth, that 4-year-old Gerald, we had wash days, and with this old Ringer washer. Does anybody know what that is? No? Oh, yeah, okay. And I can still smell the tide from this dark basement and the cheer. And then I could still hear my grandmother just humming and singing as she was washing. And I said, we called her Big Mama. Big Mama, why are you always singing? And she says, I sing when I feel good. She felt good all the time. She was always singing. Sometimes we'd sing together. And those were good times. And there were even some times when Zoe and I would sing together as well. And I could not stop the thoughts of my grandmother coming to mind. She'd take the clothes, still talking about my grandmother, she'd take those clothes in these big laundry baskets out to the backyard. And in those days, we had clotheslines. She would hang the clothes to dry in the warmth of the summer sun. So all my underwear, the socks, and everything. Anybody know anything about clotheslines? Okay, just checking. I didn't want to be talking computer science here for you. But, those were some interesting days. And in that time, I heard all these spiritual songs that my grandmother would sing. And I saw the strength that she had. I saw the honor and the pride in my grandfather and the stability that he brought to the family. A bond that I learned from all of them is something that I try to share with our girls. Not directly. You really can't directly say everything that's in your mind. You have to display it. I can only show them through the lives that Francine and I try to live. We can show them what resilience looks like. We can show them what patience feels like. We can show them what living a spiritual life can be like. And we can only hope that they can see it for themselves. So today, while my job is, as a father, is not as physically active as it used to be. When the dog gets loose and you run all over the neighborhood for the dog because the dog is going, I'm free, and I'm running, trying to find this dog, and it's like dodgeball, I'm not as physically active as I used to be. And I can tell you that no matter how old your children are, I'm still dad to them. Now I'm showing up in different ways for them, but still getting into action for them on their behalf. And we're just morphing into a different style of dad. It's funny because by this time in my life, I thought that I'd be done with being a parent or parenting. I thought that was over. I thought when you got to that certain age, the clock, it stops and you're out of that business. Not so much. There are still parent-teacher conferences and employer and parent conferences. I've spoken with some employers. I thought that the allowances would stop. Nope. I thought that the nurturing would end. Don't cry, baby. Nope. I thought that they would live out their dreams, that we'd live out ours, that we'd be invited over for dinner, we'd invite them, that we'd watch them from afar and beam with pride. No, everything just keeps continuing. They show up, we have to be invited over. They show up, we have to be invited over. And like Mother's Day, Father's Day, I thought would be a day to get a new tie, which I did, and a pair of socks and a funny card. But no, can you fix the kitchen sink, Dad? And I said, the kitchen sink? Doesn't it have instructions? She goes, yes, but I need you to fix it. And I finally got the courage to say, no. And I was sweating like a fish. Like the Christ in us. And by the way, she found a way to get it fixed. As I was saying, like the Christ in us, as a father and our Father, it's the Father's pleasure to give the children the desires of their hearts. As that happens, we grow too. We have to be more discerning, and we become more discerning. And if I really, really pay attention, there's a tremendous opportunity to learn from them too. So for me, Father's Day isn't really a day off. It's a day on because the internet still has to run, regardless of how old or how young they are, and I have to have the passwords. And even if the boyfriends are no longer there for me to run off, I'm still the father to my new son-in-law. And even as the socks and the clothing are no longer all over the neighborhood and someone knocking on your door, does this belong to you? Somebody still has to give Zoe a ride to River Falls, and Francine and I gladly do it. I also get the opportunity to help my son-in-law, Jeremy, in ways that I never thought that I would be helping. But that's okay too. That's what a father does. And on FaceTime, gosh, I wish this was happening when I was a kid. On FaceTime, I get to experience Los Angeles with my Jerea as she lives out her best life ever on the West Coast. I feel like I know every street in Los Angeles. So all of them are out of the house now and almost completely out of our pockets. And the lessons we learn from each one of them, I hadn't planned to say that, and the lessons that we learn from each one of them are pretty much the same as they were 13 years ago when I had the opportunity. Still faith, it's still perseverance, it's still growth, and it's really all about change. My job is to remember stuff. That's why I have a cell phone. I don't remember stuff. The passwords are in the phone. I don't have to remember them anymore because when they come, the streaming services have to run. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to see them growing into wonderful young ladies. So be sure, there have been a few bumps along the way, but there is one thing that's even more certain now than it was when we last spoke. I have a certainty for them that the Spirit that lives in me lives in them, whether they realize it or not. I used to worry about their spiritual development. And then one day, I don't know if it was meditation, I don't know if it was prayer, but one day the light came on and says, why are you worrying about your girls? They're fine. Because we are the examples. The Christ lives in them just as much as it lives in each one of us. I take solace from that. I know without a doubt that everything works out well. So when Dad or Grandpa, the wrinkly old man, isn't there to make the oatmeal, to help with the drafting of an email to a supervisor, or to get her husband to eat his veggies, I know that the Spirit in them is there, whether they fully realize it or not, and will continue taking care of them as Spirit always has. So in closing, I just want to share with you that fathers are always evolving. And I'm not just talking about the men who share the DNA with their children. I'm talking about every person who's ever stood in the gap, every person who's ever loved, protected, or nurtured, or guided another person, Earlier, I spoke about my grandmother as being a father figure. That's because she was. She guided so much of our lives. Fathers by birth, fathers by love, fathers by calling. I'm talking about those who show up. Not to control, not to parent perfectly, but simply to be present. That's what's important. And the rest takes care of itself. Just a couple of years ago, I found my dad. The last time I saw him, I was 18 years old. Now I am years old. And I forgave myself. Then I was able to forgive him for not being in my life. He gave during that time what he needed to give. And that's all that was required. The requirement is to live in the moment with our children, with our grandchildren, with our spiritual sons and daughters, to really be there with our minds, with our hearts, with our spirits, because when they need, what they need isn't necessarily our advice or our strength. They just need to know that you're there. That's just like the Spirit within us. It's always available. Somebody say yes. Yes. Always listening, right? Yes. Always steady, never changing. I heard Reverend Stacy say that. It never changes. But we do. I used to have an afro. We are called to reflect the divine presence. We're called to be calm in the storm. We are called to be the voice of wisdom, the one they call when they don't know where else to turn. We're called to be that individual, to be the counsel that they trust, the wayshower who leads not by force but by example, the peacemaker who reminds them that no matter how far they go, there's always a light leading them back home. That is the sacred call of fatherhood. It's not perfection, it's just simply presence. Not instruction, but inspiration. And today we honor that. We lean into that. And also we recommit to that. Happy Father's Day to all who gave life. Happy Father's Day to all those who give love. And happy Father's Day for those of you who keep showing up. And so it is. Thank you. Okay. We're going to close with a meditation, but before I get there, when I was walking in this morning, I ran into Carol, who was doing some weeding out front, making the place look great. She goes, "I can't wait to hear your talk." And I said, "I can't wait to hear it either." We're going to find out what's going